Hello, I'm Andrew Thomson with you tonight. Michael Serapio is on assignment. The opposition leader is accusing the Prime Minister of breaking the Canada-US border. That's the message from Pierre Poilievre in the wake of yesterday's First Ministers' meeting on the tariff threat from President-elect Donald Trump. Poilievre says the Trudeau government's inaction on border security is forcing provinces to pick up the slack.
So we have Quebec sending in the Sûreté du Québec, their police force, to secure the border. Premier Smith, common sense leader, is proposing to use drones, provincial drones, and other police law enforcement measures from her province to secure the borders there. I understand Doug Ford is looking at something similar. So now, because Trudeau has so thoroughly broken the border, we're getting a patchwork of premiers who have no choice but to try and hold the border together with bubble gum, Scotch tape, and elastic bands.
You heard the Conservative leader mentioning the Premier of Ontario. Here is Doug Ford today with this message about talks with Justin Trudeau and his counterparts.
Positive conversation. We look forward to tightening up the border. All the premiers agree, the Prime Minister agrees, and that's exactly what we're going to do.
Some of the premiers don't have the same calmness that you're having.
Well, I just take the positive approach. We're all in this together. It's Team Canada, and we'll get this done.
Let's talk more about Canada's response to the tariff threat since that social media post from Donald Trump on Monday. David MacNaughton was Canadian ambassador to the United States during the first Trump administration, playing a major role in the renegotiation of NAFTA. He currently serves as president of Palantir Technologies Canada. Mr. MacNaughton, good to see you.
Well, it's good to be here.
So I want to begin with this question. We've now had 72 hours, essentially, since that post from Mr. Trump threatening the 25% tariff. In that time, how would you assess the political response from Canadian leaders?
Well, I think, the Prime Minister and the Premiers had a conversation last night. I was not part of that discussion, but I understand that there was general agreement to work closely together. I think it's really important this time under President Trump, as it was the last time, that the federal government and the provinces work together, that the business community and labor work together with the government. I mean, there are obviously differences of opinion on a variety of issues, but this is this is a big threat to Canada's prosperity, and we need to hang together at least in terms of trying to figure out how we put our best foot forward.
Well, I want to ask you about the provinces and the federal government. What do you make of the fact that we are seeing some different messages from different premiers when it comes to the border, when it comes to energy? Is this essentially playing into Mr. Trump's hands here?
Well, as I say, I think that last night, from what I understand, it was a good discussion. I think it's going to take a little bit of time to get everybody, singing out of the same song sheet. It's not simple, and obviously, there have been some rather tense times between the federal government and the provinces in the last while. I mean, it does tend to happen quite a bit, but I'm optimistic that we're going to be able to pull together and, as I say, work together with the feds and the provinces and the private sector to make sure that we are aligned in terms of the messages we're giving to the U.S. Because if we're not, then they're just going to, divide and conquer is the easiest strategy you can put forward if you're trying to win.
Right. I want to ask then about your experience during the first Trump administration, during those contentious trade talks. What do you think is different this time about this second Trump administration that Canadian leaders are going to have to deal with?
Well, I think, the first go-round, I think President Trump, he was new at the job. He had recruited a bunch of people who he didn't necessarily know, he hadn't worked with, and everything else. I mean, the group he's assembled this time is, are people that he feels very close to. He thinks he can that they will, execute on what his strategy is. But I got to tell you, I mean, the first go-round was no piece of cake. I mean, it was very challenging. It was something surprising that would happen almost every day. But we did get through it. And again, and I want to emphasize this, we got through this because we put partisanship, to the side. I met with every single premier in the country, met with their cabinet, met with business leaders, and we worked together as a team, and we were able to be successful. And I obviously went around the United States, met with governors and business leaders there. But this is a time for us to to put partisanship aside and try and work together. It's not going to be easy because, there are some fairly substantial differences of opinion on some of the issues that the U.S. is concerned about, but I think we can do it.
Okay, well, we know they are concerned about border security, so I want to ask you about what comes next on that front, because we did have federal ministers coming out of the meeting yesterday with the premiers saying the government is already taking action at the border, but there could be some additional spending in the offing. The public safety minister says, one goal is to reassure Canadians and Americans about border security. What do you think that needs to look like to be an effective answer?
Well, I think if you go back a few years, the reality is that we were getting a lot of people coming across our border from the south to the north, and the whole Roxham Road thing and everything else. Obviously, we've got to be concerned this go round if, in fact, President Trump follows through with his promise to send a whole bunch of people that are in the United States out of the United States. I mean, obviously, for our own protection and everything else, we need to make sure our borders are secure. But, look, on defense and on security and even on the things like the president mentioned, fentanyl, I mean, we share the same concerns. The same thing with defense. I mean, across the Arctic is Russia. We need to, make sure that we are a reliable partner of the United States on defense and security, and we need to assure Canadians that we're actually doing whatever we need to do as a country to police the longest border between two countries anywhere in the world. It's going to be challenging, but I think we need to. Anybody who says we're doing enough right now isn't correct. We need to do more for a variety of reasons, and hopefully we can get that done over the next little while and reassure Canadians and Americans that we're protecting our citizens.
Okay, we have time for one last question, so I want to ask you this. You told the National Post this week that Canada should consider a single minister as the point person on this in Washington. So let's delve into that a little bit more. Why do you think this would help our dealings with the new administration and other key political actors in the Capitol?
Well, I think it's important that they see. There's one place to go for, if you want to get something done with Canada, here's the place to go. It isn't to 5 different ministries and, 5 different deputies and all that kind of stuff. The reality also is that there needs to be a whole of government approach to this. And so the Prime Minister, I think, needs to make sure that one person, it doesn't mean that the other ministers aren't going to be involved. He set up the Canada-U.S. Cabinet Committee. There'll be lots of discussion there. But the reality is that sometimes you need to have somebody who can actually make things happen across ministries. And we found that in the first go-round, and I think, it needs to happen now. So that's what I would do if I were the Prime Minister, but I'm not, so we'll see what happens.
All right, well, you are a former Canadian ambassador to the United States, David MacNaughton. Thank you so much for your time on this.
Okay, thank you. Take care.